Hi everybody, it's Clarke Camper with the January edition of Wall Street in Washington. Things are quiet in Washington these days. The city really has yet to reawaken from its holiday downtime, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to do something just a little bit different, and that is to give you some thoughts about how you should be approaching Washington in 2012. As we've discussed in previous editions of Wall Street in Washington, I do think that Washington in 2012 is going to be characterized really at the macro level by two things. First is going to be intense partisanship, particularly in the run-up to the November elections, and second, consequently, is going to be real gridlock in policymaking, both at the legislative and to a large extent, I believe, at the regulatory level. Now, that may cause many people to rejoice, feeling like you can run away, not have to pay attention to Washington during the year. I understand that feeling. However, that would be a real mistake because just because there isn't going to be a lot of movement at the macro level does not mean that there won't be movement on very discrete, important provisions, because indeed there will be. Let me give you a few examples. First, in tax, corporate tax reform, financial transaction tax, both things that are extremely unlikely to happen this year. However, very discrete tax provisions, particularly in a time under which we're under great duress financially, obviously looking for new revenue sources, things like 60-40 tax treatment and options, very much in play. Moving over to Dodd-Frank on the bank regulatory provisions, a lot of those have been slowed up. However, certain provisions, Volcker, for example, very much in play. Volcker at this point, the scope, the scale, the specifics of Volcker, extremely in play. And again, there's a lot of opportunity to get in there and advocate on it. The third example related to Dodd-Frank is derivatives rulemaking. As we've discussed in previous editions, the time frame for rulemakings has slipped. However, that does not mean that the SEC and CFTC aren't making some very important decisions. For instance, one that's being made right now is the finalizing the definition of major swap participant, which has huge implications for who is covered by the Dodd-Frank provisions. So, what's the takeaway? Well, it's quite simple, but yet a very important one, which is it's never been more important than now for you to sit down, identify the issues that you're concerned about, prioritize those, and then take a very hard look at whether those will fall into the category of items that I mentioned, or may fall into the category of items that I mentioned, on which there may be a fair amount of action in 2012. I would, more specifically too, I'd suggest if you have a government affairs team, sit down with them, do it in a structured way. It's too easy to just kind of make these things up on the fly. Just spend a few hours really identifying and prioritizing issues. So with that, I'll wrap things up. We'll see you next month on Wall Street and Washington.